The sickly sweet scent of coconut and vanilla hit me like a sledgehammer as I pushed open the rear entrance of Coastal Whispers Cafe. It was well after closing time, but the unmistakable aroma wafting from the kitchen could only mean one thing. Theo was baking again. I smiled to myself, thinking of surprising my husband with a bottle of his favorite Cabernet. Lord knows he deserved it after pulling another late-night baking marathon for the cafe's new summer menu. But the smile was wiped clean off my face when I rounded the corner into the kitchen. There was Theo, stark naked from the waist up, with my best friend Mara draped all over him like a discount Christmas ornament. "What the hell?" The words burst out before I could stop them. Theo jerked away from Mara, his eyes widening in shock. "Alina, I didn't expect you back so soon." "Well, I didn't expect to find you screwing my friend in our kitchen." I was seething, hands balled into fists. How could you do this to me? To us? Mara opened her mouth, but I shut her down with a venomous glare. Don't you dare say a word." "Lena, please, let me explain," Theo started, grabbing a dish towel to cover himself. "Explain what? That you've been sleeping with Mara behind my back? That you've been lying and betraying me this whole time?" I was practically shaking with rage. Theo sighed heavily. "It's not like that. He gestured between himself and Mara. "It just happened, but my feelings for you have changed. I don't love you anymore, at least not in that way." His cruel words sliced through me. I reeled back, feeling as though I'd been physically struck. After 11 years of marriage, of building this cafe from the ground up, through blood, sweat, and tears, he was just going to cast me aside? For Mara? You're kicking me out? My voice was barely above a whisper. After everything we've been through together? Theo leveled his gaze at me, his expression unreadable. "I want a divorce, Lena, and I want you to walk away from the cafe too. Mara's putting up the money for me to buy you out." "Like hell she is," I shouted, rounding on them both. "You think you can just steal my dream out from under me? This cafe is my life's work. I built it from nothing." Theo's eyes turned cold and hard. "Well, now it's my turn. And there's not a damn thing you can do to stop me." I stared at the man I once loved, the person I thought I knew better than anyone in this world. But the cruel, heartless stranger glaring back at me was utterly unrecognizable. Mara placed a placating hand on his arm, smirking at me. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Lena. Just walk away while you still can." Tears of rage streamed down my cheeks as I stood there, utterly shell-shocked by their heartless betrayal. This couldn't be happening, not to me. But the truth was inescapable. Theo was the enemy now. And as for my so-called best friend, let's just say we were going to be anything but friendly from here on out. I stormed out of Coastal Whispers, tears of rage blurring my vision. My hands shook as I fumbled with my car keys, desperate to escape the suffocating betrayal. How could Theo do this to me? To us? After pouring over a decade of blood, sweat, and tears into building our dream cafe from scratch. The roar of the engine was the only thing keeping me tethered as I peeled out of the parking lot. I drove aimlessly, my mind a cyclone of swirling pain and anger. Theo wanted me gone? Fine, I'd go. But not before burning that treacherous bastard's entire world to the ground. Night had fallen by the time I pulled up outside Max's bungalow. My brother took one look at my ashen face and immediately ushered me inside. "Lena, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The dam broke then. I collapsed onto his worn sofa, body racked with heaving sobs as I recounted the nightmarish scene from the cafe's kitchen. Max's expression darkened with every vile detail. "That low-life snake," he spat when I'd finished. "Don't worry, sis, we'll make him pay for this. I've got a buddy who's real good with fingerprint alternation and arson." "Max, no." I caught his wrist before he could retrieve whatever tools for fiery vengeance he had stowed nearby. "I don't want you getting mixed up in anything illegal, you hear me? This is my mess." He frowned, clearly reluctant to drop his harebrained scheme of incendiary justice. But I held firm, and after a few tense moments he slowly nodded in resignation. "Okay, you're right. No fire. But we have to do something to that rat bastard. He can't just get away with this." I swiped the back of my hand across my puffy eyes. "I know. And he won't. But I need a plan first. Something that'll really stick it to both of them in a way they can't ignore." The corners of Max's mouth curved upwards ever so slightly. Well now, if it's a master plan of retaliation you need, then you've come to the right guy. Over the next few hours, my anger slowly transmuted into a scorching desire for vengeance. As Max and I plotted, he dove into Theo and Mara's background, unearthing every dirty secret and shady dealing he could dig up. I pored over the cafe's business contracts, searching for any loopholes or clauses I could leverage to my advantage. By dawn, I'd amassed a veritable arsenal of incriminating evidence and legal leverage to counterattack with. Exhausted but emboldened, I turned to my brother with the first flames of determination flickering in my eyes. Theo wants to try and take my dream away? Well, he's going to learn real quick that he just awoke a hurricane. I paused, letting the weight of my words resonate. That bastard has no idea what he's in for. Max grinned savagely. That's my girl. Now let's go burn that cheating scumbag's world down around his ears. At long last, a feral smile carved its way across my face. Justice, however belated, was finally about to be served. I spent the next few days holed up at Max's place, poring over the mountain of evidence he'd dug up on Theo and Mara. Shady real estate deals, undeclared income, even a few harassment claims filed by former employees. Those two had more skeletons rattling around than a haunted house. But none of it seemed like a slam dunk for regaining control of Coastal Whispers. At least, not until I stumbled across a bizarre addendum buried deep in the fine print of the cafe's partnership agreement. "Hey Max, get over here and take a look at this." I waved my brother over, hardly daring to believe what I was reading. Max squinted at the document, lips silently mouthing the words. Then his eyes went wide. "No way. You're not serious?" I grinned wolfishly. As a coronary, turns out there's a delightfully ironic loophole in mine and Theo's contract. "Well, don't keep me in suspense, sis. Spill it." Taking a breath to savor the moment, I recited the critical paragraph. If at any point one partner is discovered to have engaged in an extramarital affair or otherwise flagrantly violated the tenets of fidelity inherent to the business relationship, complete ownership and operational control shall immediately revert to the wronged party. Max's boisterous laughter filled the room. "You're kidding me. That cheating scuzzball literally signed away his rights to the cafe the second he stuck his dong in your friend." "Yup. Looks like the universe has a pretty warped sense of karma." I couldn't stop the grin from splitting my face. Finally, I had the legal high ground to make Theo and Mara pay for their disgusting betrayal. But first, I needed to cover all my bases. I whipped out my phone and rapidly typed out a text. "Theo, meet me at the cafe in 1 hour. We need to talk." Max arched an eyebrow. "You sure that's wise? Confronting that two-timing jackal in person?" I leveled him with a look that could fusion cut through steel. "He's the one who made this personal by trying to rip my dream away. It's only right that I return the favor by ramming this victory down his throat directly." "Fair enough." Max held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just be careful, eh? That snake isn't going to give up the cafe without one hell of a fight. Don't worry, I'm counting on it." My smile turned predatory as I grabbed my purse. In fact, that's exactly what I want. An hour later, I strode through the front doors of Coastal Whispers like a woman possessed. Theo was already there, glowering at me from behind the counter. "What do you want, Lena?" he spat, venom dripping from his words. "Come to beg for your job back before I replace you with some fresh new talent?" I smirked, sashaying up to him with a lethal twinkle in my eye. "Not quite. Though I do have an exciting new business proposition for you." Then I slapped the damning contract clause down on the countertop, relishing the look of stunned horror that crept across Theo's face as he read it. "You see, it turns out your little fling with Mara violated this lovely provision right here." I tapped the document with a perfectly manicured nail, "which means Coastal Whispers reverts to my full ownership, effective immediately." Theo sputtered, anger and disbelief warring across his features. But there was no denying the legally binding nature of what was printed in black and white. You can't do this," he finally managed. "This is my cafe now." "Was your cafe," I purred, drinking in his impotent rage. Turning on my heel, I headed for the door, hurling one last remark over my shoulder like a dagger between his shoulder blades. "I'd get packing if I were you, Theo. You and your trampy girlfriend just became little more than very expensive tenants." Revenge, like a perfectly aged Cabernet, tasted oh so sweet going down. The look of stunned disbelief on Theo's face as I walked out of Coastal Whispers was more satisfying than any gourmet dish I'd ever prepared. For too long, that conniving snake had held all the cards. But not anymore. Now it was my turn to go on the offensive. My first call was to Miriam, the cafe's former head chef, who Theo had fired shortly after his affair with Mara began. She answered on the third ring, audible surprise in her voice. "Lena? Is that you? I didn't expect to hear from you, especially after how things went down with that no-good husband of yours." "Ex-husband," I corrected coolly. "And that's exactly why I'm calling. I've got a way to make Theo pay for how he treated both of us, but I'll need your help to pull it off." There was a pregnant pause, then Miriam's tone took on a hard edge. "I'm listening." 15 minutes later, she was sitting across the kitchen table from me, lips pressed into a grim line as I laid out the details of my plan. When I finished, she simply nodded once and stood up. "Consider me in. That pathetic little weasel, Theo, is going to regret the day he ever double-crossed us." Her gaze was steely with determination. "When do we start?" By the end of the day, I'd managed to rally the rest of the cafe's old crew that Theo had so unceremoniously discarded once Mara sank her claws into the business. David, the brilliant pastry chef, whose unique recipes drew rave reviews. Carlos, the unflappable manager who kept the entire operation running like a well-oiled machine. Even old Earl, who'd bust tables at Coastal Whispers for years before being forced into an abrupt retirement. One by one, they all pledged their unwavering support to my cause. "You always treated us with respect, like family," Carlos stated simply, eyes shining with gratitude. "Theo lost sight of what really matters a long time ago. We're with you until the end, Jeffa." With my allies assembled, it was time to deploy Phase 2 of my grand strategy. Start siphoning away Coastal Whispers customers. In a daring move, I set up a humble pop-up stand just down the street from the cafe, using recipes and skills honed over years of blood, sweat, and passion. Word traveled fast in the tight-knit community. By lunchtime the next day, there was already a line stretching down the block as locals flocked to support my solo venture. I greeted each one with a warm smile, dishing out piping hot meals, absolutely bursting with love and tradition. "Best darn Cubano I've had in years," one elderly patron crowed through a mouthful of slow-roasted pork and molten Swiss cheese. "That no-good Theo doesn't know what he's missin'." His wife nodded vigorously. "We've been coming to that cafe since before he and Lena took it over. Used to be such a lovely place, you know. But ever since that trollop Mara started calling the shots, the food and service have gone straight down the toilet." Glancing over my shoulder, I allowed myself a vindicated smile at the sight of Coastal Whispers nearly empty, with Theo stuck behind the counter looking utterly dejected. One by one, I was going to bleed that treacherous snake dry and reclaim what was rightfully mine. The cafe, the customers, the dream he'd tried so selfishly to steal away, all of it would be restored. And Theo was going to kick himself forever for awakening the vengeful fury he now faced. With the community solidly rallying behind me, it was time to move into the next phase of my grand plan for karmic retribution against Theo and Mara. I had them on the ropes, but I needed to go for the kill shot while I could. "You sure about this, sis?" Max asked, eyeing me with a mixture of concern and pride. "Once you file those papers, there's no going back." I didn't even have to think about it. Theo brought this on himself the second he betrayed me and tried to steal my dream out from under me. He's going to learn there are consequences for hurting people like that. The courthouse was a cold, imposing edifice of steel and stone, but I strode through those front doors like I owned the place, Joseph and Carlos right behind me with boxes of compelling evidence in hand. Judge Ramos was an older man with stern features and eyes that seemed to stare straight through you. But I met his withering gaze without flinching as I stepped up to the plaintiff's table. "Your Honor, I come before you today seeking an injunction against Theo Manning to immediately cease operations of Coastal Whispers Cafe based on documented breaches of our business partnership agreement." There was a murmur in the gallery as I laid out the cold, hard facts piece by piece. Theo's extramarital affair, evidenced by security footage and eyewitness accounts. His financial mismanagement and siphoning of funds for personal use with his mistress Mara. blatant violations of our mutually agreed-upon operational standards and ethics clauses. I was like a machine gun of grievances and infractions, relentlessly peppering the court with an overwhelming mountain of proof that Theo had not only broken my heart, but utterly shattered the sacred vows of our business partnership. Just when it seemed like I depleted every last ounce of damning documentation, Carlos stepped up with the final blow, Theo's signed copy of our original cafe agreement, including the provision that any infidelity immediately forfeited his ownership stake. A hush fell over the court as Theo's face drained of what little color it had left. His lawyer, some slick-haired pretty boy in a too-expensive suit, immediately started babbling objections. But Judge Ramos silenced him with a single withering glare. "I've seen more than enough evidence here today to grant the plaintiff's injunction," he stated, in a tone that brooked no argument. Turning to face Theo, who seemed to shrink underneath his scathing gaze, the judge's next words practically seared the air. "Mr. Manning, your conduct in this matter has been utterly reprehensible from both a legal and moral standpoint. You have irreparably violated the trust that formed the foundation of your business partnership through duplicitous and unethical actions." His piercing stare swept the hushed courtroom, daring anyone to challenge his ruling. "I'm issuing an immediate injunction barring Mr. Manning and his associate from entering or operating Coastal Whispers Cafe effective today. Furthermore, I am stripping them of any legal ownership stake and awarding full control to the plaintiff, Miss Lena Hayes, in perpetuity." The judgmental bang of his gavel was like a thunderclap sealing Theo's fate. I couldn't stop the triumphant grin that split my face as confused muttering rippled through the stunned gallery. Sweet, delicious vindication at last. Of course, Theo immediately started howling protests, face twisted in impotent rage, but it didn't matter anymore. He was yesterday's news, as obsolete as stale breadcrumbs. Turning on my heel, I sashayed past his flailing form, pausing just long enough to revel in his humiliation. "Like I told you, Theo, you awoke a hurricane," I murmured coolly, "and now it's going to swallow you whole." Leaving him to scream futile curses into the void, I strode from the courtroom, head held high. The next chapter was just beginning, and this time, the story was all mine. The tension in the courthouse was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. All eyes were locked on me as I confidently took the stand, ready to lay Theo's betrayal and misdeeds bare for the world to see. His lawyer was a cocky young pup in an expensive suit, looking utterly smug as he sauntered up to begin cross-examination. "Miss Hayes, isn't it true that you've had a personal vendetta against my client ever since discovering his indiscretion with Miss Hendricks?" I leveled him with a glacial stare. "I don't have any vendetta, counselor. I'm simply pursuing justice for the illegal and unethical actions your client took to try and steal my business out from under me." "Steal is a very loaded term," the lawyer said with a greasy smile. "My client was merely exercising his rights as equal partner and owner of Coastal Whispers when he started making." "Objection!" My own lawyer jumped to his feet. "That allegation of ownership is precisely what's at stake here today." Sustained, the judge's gravelly tone cut through the heated exchange like a sword. "Watch yourself, Mr. Klein. Arguing about conclusions of law in front of this court is out of line." Klein's smile remained plastered on, but I could see the edges becoming a little too tight. "My apologies, Your Honor. Allow me to rephrase." He turned back to me with a snake-like gaze. "Miss Hayes, can you prove definitively that my client's relationship with Miss Hendricks was, in fact, a violation of your business agreement?" A feral smile stretched across my face as I reached for the TV remote. With a few taps, I queued up the security footage from that fateful night, the night my life changed forever. The hushed courtroom watched in silence as grainy black-and-white figures appeared on the screen. It was me entering through the rear entrance of Coastal Whispers Cafe, heading to the kitchen, and then freezing as the unmistakable forms of Theo and Mara came into view. There was no mistaking what they were doing, half-dressed and wrapped around each other like tangled vines. "I walked in on them like that," I stated flatly once the footage cut out, fighting to keep my voice steady. "My husband and my best friend, carrying on an affair right there in the kitchen where we prepared food for the public every single day." A shocked murmur went through the crowd at the sordid revelation. Even the judge's eyes went momentarily wide before his stern mask slammed back into place. That's outrageous, completely out of context. Klein sputtered, suddenly looking a lot less sure of himself. I moved to strike that video from the record as blatant character assassination. Overruled, the judge stated with stony finality. That footage appears to corroborate Miss Hayes' allegations of a sexual affair between the defendants, which, as has already been established, violates their jointly signed partnership clause. As Klein shrank back, deflated, I pressed my advantage. I'd like to enter the relevant portion of our contract into evidence, if I may? The judge gave a curt nod, and I slid a copy of the agreement forward, pointing out the damning paragraph that Theo's serial infidelity had tripped. By the time I was done reading it aloud, you could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. Every eye was locked on Theo and Mara, expressions ranging from horror to outright disgust. Pressing my lips into a grim line, I rose from the witness stand and approached the multimedia console. A few keystrokes later, and I had photos of Theo and Mara plastered across the courtroom's viewing screens. Photos of them shopping for high-priced real estate, using funds clearly siphoned from Coastal Whispers' revenues. Others appeared to show them funneling money into offshore accounts under bogus holding companies. Your Honor, I present evidence that Mr. Manning's reprehensible actions went far beyond a simple breach of our moral and professional vows. My voice rang out, cold and hard as steel. He conspired with his mistress to defraud me, bleed my company dry, and steal my entire life's work to fund their selfish whims. There was no hiding the white-hot fury blazing in my eyes now, as I locked gazes with Theo at last. He didn't just betray me as a husband, but as a business partner and human being as well. And for that, he needs to be held fully accountable under the law. The courtroom was utterly still as the grave after I finished, as if collectively holding its breath for the judgment to come. When the judge finally spoke, his words were measured but laced with undisguised contempt. Mr. Manning, Miss Hendricks, in my 37 years on the bench, I have seldom encountered individuals with such a profound lack of ethics or moral fiber. Your egregious, premeditated actions have left this court no choice but to consider the absolute maximum sanctions permitted by law. At last, vindication would be mine. As courtroom deputies moved in to place Theo and Mara under arrest, I made sure they got one final look at the face of the woman they had dared to try and destroy. This is what karma tastes like, I said, loud enough for them to hear. Look into my eyes and burn it into your memories forever, because you're never going to forget this day as long as you live. The judge's gruff voice cut through the tense courtroom like a hot knife through butter. Let the record show that based on the incontrovertible evidence presented, I am finding in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Lena Hayes. My heart soared at those beautiful words. After weeks of shredding my soul, strategizing and battling against Theo's deceptions, it had all been worth it. Mr. Manning's deplorable actions represent a criminal violation of the partnership agreement he willingly entered into. As such, I am immediately revoking his rights of ownership and control over Coastal Whispers Cafe, awarding full legal claim to Miss Hayes. Theo stiffened in his seat, face flushing beet red with impotent rage. His scumbag lawyer made one last desperate attempt to object, but the judge's piercing glare swiftly silenced him. Furthermore, the evidence of financial misconduct, fraud, and embezzlement perpetrated by Mr. Manning and Miss Hendricks has been forwarded to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Until such time as formal charges are filed, you are both remanded into custody without bail. As a pair of burly bailiffs moved in to slap handcuffs on the stunned couple, reality finally seemed to hit Theo like a sledgehammer blow between the eyes. His mouth worked furiously, spitting curses and indignant outbursts. But the clanking of cold steel on his wrists only drove home the harsh truth. He had finally been beaten. "You lying, vindictive little bitch," Theo exploded, straining against the bailiffs like a rabid dog on a leash as they hustled him and Mara away. "I'll bury you for this, you hear me? You're not going to get away with destroying my life so easily." I simply smiled and waved, soaking in his rabid fury as the ultimate victory. "Ta-ta, Theo. Thanks for being such a colossal prick and making this so satisfying." The last vision of my traitorous ex-husband was his contorted face vanishing behind the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. Then it was just me and the muted cacophony of shocked whispers from the gallery. "Order! This court will have order." The judge's bark cut through the buzzing like a thunderclap, silencing the masses once more. Only when the room fell still again did the older magistrate turn his gaze back to me, eyes gentling ever so slightly. "Miss Hayes, I feel I must commend you on the grace and fortitude you've shown throughout these abhorrent proceedings. You have more than proven your ethical fitness to resume full ownership of Coastal Whispers." Reflexively straightening at the rare praise, I inclined my head respectfully toward the bench. "Thank you, Your Honor. That means more than you could possibly know." Something flickered in the old man's eyes, the faintest trace of warmth breaking through that perpetually stern facade. Then it was gone, sealed behind iron professionalism once more. "This matter is concluded. Court is adjourned."
As the morning dew kisses the earth gently, I rise with the sun, feeling free, feeling plenty. In the quietude of dawn, where dreams unfold, I find solace in rhythm and stories untold. From the whispers of trees to the songs of birds, I draw inspiration from life's gentle words. In the symphony of nature, my spirit soars, a melody of hope behind closed doors. I lace up my shoes, hit the pavement light, each step a beat. In the rhythm of life, with every breath I rewrite my story in the stars, shining bright. In the stillness of the morning, I find my flow. In the silence of the sunrise, I let it all go. With every verse I let my heart show. In the gentle beginnings, my spirit will grow. In the hustle of the day, I find my stride. With every challenge I face, I take it in my stride. In the chaos of life, I seek to confide in the power of music where I can reside. From the city streets to the open sky, I spread my wings, ready to fly. In the rhythm of motion, I amplify my dreams, my hopes, reaching for the sky. I paint my world with words, colors bright. In the canvas of life, I find my light. With every rhyme, I ignite a fire within, burning bright. In the stillness of the morning, I find my flow. In the silence of the sunrise, I let it all go. With every verse I let my heart show. In the gentle beginnings, my spirit all grows. So here I stand, in the twilight's embrace, a storyteller in this vast space. With every word I speak, I trace my journey, my truth, leaving a trace. So as the sun sets and the day's at rest, I lay down my pen, feeling blessed. In the gentle beginnings, I confess my love for this art, ever impressed.
The gavel fell with finalizing thump, and just like that, it was over. As I rose from the plaintiff's table, gathering my things in a bit of a daze, I noticed a bailiff waiting discreetly by the doors. He gave me a subtle nod, one hand drifting toward his belt where a sheathed nightstick hung. Frowning slightly, I shook my head in response. As satisfying as it would have been, there was no need to add police brutality to Theo's suffering that day. He was already beaten, brought lower than I could have ever imagined. Giving the bailiff an appreciative smile, I patted the front of my blazer over my heart. "Thanks, but no thanks, officer. I think my side's been more than repaid here today." Turning on my heel, I exited the courtroom with my head held high, world finally set right again. The nightmare was officially over, and now it was time to get back to the cafe and restore my passion project to its former glory. As I stepped out onto the sun-drenched plaza, the breeze carried a savory, enticing aroma that made my mouth water instantly. Following the scent, I rounded a corner to find Max waiting beside a pop-up grill, tending to a fresh batch of my award-winning cilantro lime chicken skewers. "Well, how'd my baby sis do in there?" He cocked an eyebrow expectantly. Unable to stop the blazing grin that split my face, I simply opened my arms wide. Needing no further invitation, Max rushed over and swept me up in a bone-crushing bear hug, laughing uproariously. "That's my girl! Burning bastards down in the courtroom just like we drew it up." Setting me back on my feet, his eyes shone with pride. "Gotta admit, didn't think you'd actually be able to pull this whole crazy-ass revenge plot off without a hitch." "You wound me, brother." I chuckled, playfully swatting at his arm. "When have I ever failed at anything I set my mind to?" With a contented sigh, I snagged a skewer from the grill and took a bite, letting the zesty, familiar flavors ignite my taste buds. The pain was still there, the betrayal still raw. But overshadowing all of it was the knowledge that karmic justice had been decisively served. I was free to move forward, to reclaim my dream, my cafe, my future. And from here on out, that future burned brighter than the noonday sun. A warm, gentle breeze carried the invigorating scent of fresh paint and citrus polish as I stood outside the newly refurbished Coastal Whispers. It had been a whirlwind few months working to restore the cafe to its former glory after the darkness of Theo and Mara's betrayal. But each sweep of the primer brush, every granite countertop installation, and menu redesign session was imbued with a sense of rebirth, of reclaiming what was rightfully mine and letting go of the past's toxic baggage once and for all. Closing my eyes, I inhaled deeply, allowing the essence of new beginnings to fill my lungs. When I opened them again, the world seemed just a touch brighter, more vibrant. "You ready for this, Shefa?" Carlos's gruff voice made me turn. The burly manager stood in the open doorway, a proud grin stretching his craggy features. I matched his smile and gave a decisive nod. "More than ready. Let's go show this town what a real comeback looks like." Sweeping inside, I drank in the transformed interior with a sense of profound peace. Every polished surface, gleaming appliance, and elegant place setting resonated with the ardor I'd poured in this renewed vision. Miriam and her crew already had the kitchen humming like a well-oiled machine. The aromas of slow-roasted meats, sauce reductions, and fresh-baked bread mingling into a mouth-watering symphony. Just breathing it in was enough to make my heart swell with pride for the culinary artistry about to be unleashed. "Okay, people, you all know the drill," I called out in my best commander voice, drawing the attention of my newly reassembled staff. "We are back in business, and better than ever before. But that means we're going to have some very particular patrons to impress tonight." There were a few snickers at that, along with more than a few expressions that bordered on bloodthirsty anticipation. Our goal is to not just satisfy them, we're going to utterly decimate any and all expectations. My own grin stretched thin and feral. Every bite, every course, will be an experience that blows their minds and puts the final nail into that coffin we buried those two traitors in months ago. A roar of approval met my fiery words. Even normally unflappable Miriam was sporting a wicked gleam in her eye as she gave the line cooks their final instructions. Saddle up, folks. Tonight, we dine in hell. The grand reopening was scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp. Myself behind the Matrid station, hands clasped and head held high, as the first guests began filtering through the doors just before start time. There were the usual familiar faces from the community, loyal patrons who had stuck by my side through the darkest days of Theo's deception. Hard-working families, sprightly retirees, dedicated wage slaves letting loose after long shifts. But my real focus was on the small party huddled by the entrance, shifting uncomfortably beneath the weight of so many sidelong glares and stony silence. Both Theo and Mara looked utterly diminished compared to their former arrogant selves, gaunter, paler, with a permanent hunted look in their eyes, as though they could sense the ferocious animosity in the air directed solely at them. Suppressing a vindicated grin, I broke away from my station to greet the pitiful pair. Well, if it isn't Mr. Manning and Miss Hendricks, I stated, tone dripping with saccharine mock innocence. So glad you two could make it to our little reopening soiree. Theo's eyes narrowed to slits, mouth working in a rictus snarl as he fought to keep his composure. Mara wouldn't even meet my gaze, shrinking inward as if trying to become as small and invisible as humanly possible. We were invited, the man I once loved spat through gritted teeth. No mention of what kind of insidious torture you had cooked up. I allowed myself a small, serene smile, utterly devoid of warmth. Oh, there'll be plenty of torture involved tonight, that much I can assure you. But first, gesturing imperiously for Carlos to come over, I fixed Theo with my most predatory stare yet. I simply wanted to formally welcome you back, so you could see with your own eyes exactly what became of your pathetic attempt to steal my dream. A heavy silence fell over the entire restaurant as the other patrons picked up on the confrontation, conversations dying off in waves of eavesdropped anticipation. Because from this day forward, you and that whore you chose to destroy everything for are nothing more to me than ghosts, I hissed with dark finality. Lingering echoes of the past, with nowhere left to haunt. You get to watch from the sidelines as I build Coastal Whispers back stronger, better, and more beloved than ever before. My smile turned razor-edged and raptor-cruel, and all you two parasites can do is starve in obscurity.